Do you ever wonder what happened to your friends from high school? I mean, you were so close. You laughed together, you cried together, you shared some of the best years of your lives together. And yet, somehow through life, you just lost touch. Now it's time to relive those moments once again. Introducing the podcast that takes you back in time to the place where it all began. This is Class Reunion. We're bringing you all the gossip, secrets, and scandals from your high school days that you won't want to miss. Join us as we catch up with old classmates and dive into the wildest stories from our high school days. From those legendary parties to the infamous cliques, we're spilling all the tea on who's who and what really went down. So grab a seat, turn your volume up, and get ready for a trip down memory lane. Class Reunion, the podcast that reunites us all. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Class Reunion. I have with me Jarom Rogers. Did I say that right? We practiced this like 5 times.
You did. Great job.
Thank you. So, and we are going to do a Father's Day episode, which I'm very, very excited about. I had a phone call and just kind of said, listen, I feel like the male voice of kind of that relationship that has, started from your own father to you, to your kids. I'm interested in how life has changed that perspective because I think men's roles are confusing at best. And so I'm not qualified to talk on it. So this is your Father's Day special to talk about what it means to you. And I'm very excited to have you on. So thank you for joining today.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. And I don't know if I'm qualified to be totally transparent.
Well, as parents, we never ace the test, do we? That's for sure.
That is for sure.
And we just found out we have connection in Michigan. So you have family in Michigan. Is that where we're going to start with your grandfather too, because that's a cool story. But where was your father born and raised?
Yeah. So the Michigan's actually the in-laws side. So my family, my bloodline, we go back a ways to Phoenix, Arizona. So I'm one of the few natives actually here left in Phoenix. Most people in Phoenix now are transplants from different states.
Same with Florida. Yep.
Yeah. Oh, true. Same thing with Florida.
If you're born and raised, I'm like, what are you doing here? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So both of my grandparents were from Phoenix. Well, my mom's dad was from Utah, moved to Phoenix from southern Utah for work. There was more work opportunities here in Phoenix than there were in the small town of Escalante, Utah. And but then, beautiful. My absolutely beautiful
Utah mountains. There's nothing like it.
But yeah, my parents were both raised here in Phoenix. My dad was raised here in Phoenix. And my dad's dad, my grandpa Rogers, served in the Army. He was, the way that he was born and raised, was quite different than the way that I was born and raised, and a lot different than the way that I parent my son. So it's definitely the dynamics of fatherhood and parenting as a dad has changed over 2-3 generations for sure.
And did your grandfather have history of family members being in service, or he just chose to?
It's a great question. I don't think so. I think that was just what he decided to do.
Right.
And it's funny. The stories I hear of others talking about my grandpa was no emotion, just straight face. Didn't laugh, didn't smile. It was just all business, and that was it. All
duty, as they say, right?
All duty.
Yeah.
And my dad, he didn't fall super far from that tree, but he definitely expresses a lot more emotion than my grandfather did.
And that's what I want to kind of explore, because how those things change is, I don't know if I want to use the word scary, but it is a big change. You're fighting traditional patterns and going against the grain and saying, I want to do things a little different. It is, I think, difficult for men, right? Mm-hmm. So I would like to know if your dad changed a little bit. Was it something that your grandfather noticed? Or probably these things weren't discussed, right, that you would know. But I wonder if he noticed that he was raising you differently as a grandparent watching, that he's much more, well, somewhat more hands-on, I would imagine.
Yeah,
Not by much, maybe not by much,
yeah,
but some.
I would definitely say yes. I
Yeah.
would definitely say that he had noticed how my father's parenting style to me was much different than his parenting style was to him. And I'm sure that
Yeah.
my dad looks at me and sees how I parent my sons
Right.
differently than he parented me.
And he
So
was a corporate man, so he wasn't in the military, but he was a corporate
he,
man. This is
yeah,
your father we're talking about.
yeah, my dad worked for corporate America for a really long time. And
Yeah.
then, he basically had the option to lie to his boss to keep his job or be honest. And he
Hmm.
decided to be honest. And that made him leave the corporate America and just be an entrepreneur and start his own company. And he's done really well since then.
Which he has a fantastic cleaning business that he started. And he probably, what's interesting is he could probably scale it even more, but he also, which is not common. I mean, I think it's cool that he also recognizes I want my time.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, next generation from a military man, he recognizes that, yes, I'm successful, but I don't want to overdo that and keep growing this to where I don't have time with my family.
Yeah, absolutely.
So when he went through all of that, were you married yet
No, I was young. I was
when he went to
probably in,
started his own business?
yep,
Okay.
yep. And I mean, I specifically remember there being, as a child, you can feel a lot of the stress sometimes between, a husband and a wife and a child starting up
Absolutely.
a new business, a lot of unknowns. How are we paying bills? And, there's some people who would look at that. I look at that as such a blessing that I got to experience that stress
Hmm.
between my parents and as a family unit. That to me is a blessing because I look back on that and
Hmm.
see the hard times that they went through and know that I can overcome hard things. So I know some others may not agree with me on that, but that I'm grateful I was able to experience them going through those hard times
Hmm.
as being in charge of a family unit. But they very non-vocal, right? They're not telling us things are hard at
Right.
all.
Right.
No one knows anything, but you can taste it, you can
Yeah.
touch it. You
Yeah.
know that something's in the air.
Yeah. And that's a cool perspective. And I appreciate you looking at it as a blessing because the opposite can be true. How many times do people stand at their wedding, which, and again, there's no right or wrong, just thinking, differently, and say, I had a 42, 45-year-old marriage to watch my parents. I can't wait to, have something as special as they do, which is beautiful and somewhat true, but could be a little misleading because trials and tribulations come with life, right? And so if a couple thinks everything is perfect based on what their parents were doing, then when a snag comes in, you don't feel prepared because you're like, well, that's not what my parents went through, or that's not how my
Mm-hmm.
parents are. They never raised their voice or they never argued, probably because they took a lot of long walks around the neighborhood, you know,
Uh-huh.
so to see that conflict, I agree with you is, or at least the stressors is a healthy way to approach what a relationship really could be and that you can get
Yeah,
through all of those things, you know?
absolutely.
Now, also, since you said you were young, I would imagine, and you might not have these answers either, but there is such a impression that men have to have a certain job or title. And so when he went and left corporate America and did do his own business, especially not that there's anything wrong with the cleaning business, but so polar opposite from Mr. Corporate America, did you sense any snickering or like, conversations where it wasn't the norm with people around you? Or were you in a neighborhood where there were other entrepreneurs and it was like, he had a crew or somebody that he could talk to, or was he standing there on his own trying to do his own business while everyone
Yeah.
else was going to another corporate job?
Yeah. Great question. He had a partner that he partnered with, uh, and they kind of grew it together. But yeah, I mean, when people ask, "Hey, what does your dad do?" It's a lot easier to say, "Oh, my dad's an attorney,"
Right.
and instead of
Right.
saying like, "Oh, my dad owns a home cleaning company."
Right.
But gosh, I'll tell you, through growing up just a little bit, because I still consider myself a child at heart,
Yeah.
um, there's very few things that actually truly matter in life, and very few like legit priorities.
Yeah.
And having a happy, healthy family is number one,
Mm-hmm.
and that's really all that matters. And
Mm-hmm.
so, being young and telling people that, oh, my dad owns a home cleaning company may have been not embarrassing, but not like something you obviously you want to feel like you come from a prestigious bloodline of education and whatever else. And my dad's very well educated,
Of course. Yeah.
but not very many people can be an entrepreneur.
Right.
And that takes a whole lot more skin in the game and courage and confidence than to just go through school and hope to land a job at an HOA company as a lawyer or whatever it might be.
Yeah.
But I wouldn't say that there were a whole lot of entrepreneurs in the area that I grew up in. We lived comfortably below, I would say, we didn't go without,
Right.
but we also didn't get the fancy stuff like everybody else did at Christmas. There were 6 siblings, so there are a lot of mouths to feed.
Yeah. Well, and that's also a testament to his bravery to do that with 6 kids, right? Like right now, the trend, and we're going to talk about you, who has about 75 different jobs as well. So the apple didn't fall far from the tree. But there's this trend right now where it's, to those that are doing well in corporate America, kudos. I'm not trying to say it's a negative thing, but I think the eyes are open, and every generation thereafter from your dad on down is getting keen to the fact that you can easily waste a lot of your lifetime for a company that will drop you in a second. And while there's this fear and trepidation of doing something on your own, it is your, it is your business, and it's up to you to decide. You can't fire yourself necessarily. I mean, you might be able to, might have an issue of money, which we're going to talk about your past year, but the reality is that feeling, I've done it. I did the podcast because corporate America ate me alive, and I was just kind of aging out of the whole system, and I wasn't going to keep the salary because once you get up there, you're the first to go. And so while this world is new and scary, I only have myself to blame if I don't do very well at the end of the day.
Yep.
I'm not on a
Yep.
Zoom call trying to say the perfect thing to keep me alive for another day. So he did something so unique back then that should be applauded, and is only getting more prevalent as, men, the generations after take a risk. I grew up where, if I had done this, I mean, my parents are no longer with me, but they'd be rolling over their grave right now if I was in this field.
Yeah.
Hi, mom and dad. But because they're just very traditional and thought 401k and stability with your kids and insurance and all of those things that are beautiful, but your quality of life in who you want to be as a human being doesn't come through your working for somebody else. I don't think, So you watched this whole entrepreneurial spirit, and when you went to school, did you graduate from college or?
I did. I went to Arizona State University and I got a degree in finance. So I was the first person in my entire family, both sides, my mom's side and my dad's side, even going back to my grandparents, that I am aware of that actually got a college degree.
Really? Good for you. That's awesome. And finance, how perfect, right? Because it does dovetail into what you're doing. But did you start out with the American job, right? Did you do that first before we'll get into what you're currently doing? But
that's a great question. So I had a really good friend of mine who was about 10 years older than me. And when I was in high school, he lived down the street from me. And when I was in high school, he would call me, and he was already married, had a couple of young kids. And he would say, "Hey, Jarom, do you want to come and earn some money?" And I said, "Sure. What are we doing?" "Oh, we're trashing out some properties." And I'm like, okay, fantastic. So he was in property management. And so he would get all of these side jobs on the weekend to
Yeah.
help supplement some income or earn some extra income. And I'm like, absolutely. Like, I'd love to help you and make some income on a weekend.
Right.
And so that, that was my first kind of job. I worked corporate America at a call center before that. And I'm like, this is not for me. I hate
Oh,
9 to
brutal. It's so
5. It's
brutal.
just, it is so brutal. So
Yeah.
anyways, I worked with him on the weekends in high school, post high school. I served a mission for the church that I'm a member of for 2 years, in Argentina. And so when I got back, I decided that I wanted to go into property management because I wanted to have the ability to do jobs like this outside of normal working business hours.
Yeah.
And so I've been an entrepreneur at heart for ever since I can remember.
Wow.
And going back, and I worked corporate after I did property management for a year, and I could only take a year of it.
Yeah. I mean,
I had to
again,
get out.
it's what a lot of us did do, are told to do. And again, we talked about saying an attorney. If you're an attorney or a doctor or specific position in something that you want to do, then you have to be in some type of corporate system. But the average, I
Yep.
was in sales forever, and I think, oh boy, the calls I did on vacation, and all of that is just crazy.
Oh yeah. Yep.
So let's get into your relationship with your dad. At that
Yeah.
time before you got married, were you two emotionally connected, or was it still always the typical father-son conversations of how are you doing? What do you need? What do you want to do with your life? Like,
Yep.
what was that like?
You know what? My dad is so incredible. I would say that we're still not very emotionally connected.
Okay.
I remember, so like I mentioned just previously, I served a mission for my church for 2 years. And I
Yes.
remember when I spoke in church, like they call it a farewell before you leave for 2
Yep.
years.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember at the pulpit saying, Dad, I know I've never really told you this before, but I want you to know that I love you. And so saying I love you to each
Goosebumps.
other, like that
Yeah.
just doesn't happen.
Didn't. No.
We don't have that emotional connection. But me personally, I also don't feel like I necessarily need it because my dad would show me his love through his example.
Yeah.
And words to me in general are cheap.
Yeah.
And his example definitely demonstrated his love for me and my siblings.
We talk about love languages with couples, but you do end up having them with your parents. You'll know, like you said, you develop who they are to know that was special what they said or did,
Yep.
or their intention behind it. But I wanted to ask you that because part of the phone call that you and I had was I'm just so interested in the progression of how these roles have changed with men. And I don't know that men talk about it. Right. So for you to say that out loud to him, I wonder if he knew that was a sign of you wanting to now be a different version of a man. You love your dad, but I'm just saying you want to come into your own because your surroundings are so different now.
Mm-hmm.
And what you're going to have as a challenge in a relationship is far different than how your parents met and got married. Right.
Yeah.
So now you're going to date, and you take me through your choice of spouse and how you see how that changed so much of what your parents traditionally went through.
Yeah, gosh.
Because
And
I'm
that's
sure you had a
even,
lot more dialogue with each other than your parents or your grandparents, right?
that's actually, and I'm glad you brought that up. So again, I can probably count on one hand the amount of time that I've actually seen my parents kiss.
Okay. Right.
So it wasn't super normal for my parents to be intimate with each other in front of their kids.
Yeah.
And so,
even though they had 6 of them.
yeah, right.
Yeah.
And so my wife came from the exact opposite, where her parents were extremely, all over each other in front of the family, like holding hands, hugging, kissing, all of that was normal.
Mm-hmm.
I grew up in like it's a handshake.
Right. Right.
Um,
At first dinner must
and
have like blown your mind when you're like watching them. Yeah.
yeah, it definitely a different, just a different dynamic. And so
Yeah.
that's how I started dating my wife. You know, we don't hold hands.
Yeah.
I don't put my arm around you or when we're sitting on the couch, like there is no public display of affection, I guess, PDA. And so my wife's like, I don't think so.
Yeah. I was going to say that.
Like
Yeah.
that's not going to fly with me. You better learn some PDA or else this isn't going to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've definitely slowly adapted to more of the PDA side of our
Right.
relationship. And you know, my dad and I don't think my dad and I have like ever. I never remember my dad like kissing me like as a boy ever. But with my boys, I am all over my boys. I am like kissing the heck out of them, and it's definitely different for
Definitely.
sure.
Oh, for sure. Did you have six? So you had sisters, I'm sure. You're not
Yeah,
all.
3 girls, 3 boys. Yep.
How was he with your sisters? I mean, yeah, your sisters, his daughters.
I wouldn't say it was a whole lot different.
Okay.
There may have been a little bit more emotion there. Like, I think he connected with them more emotionally, definitely, than he would connect emotionally with his sons,
Right.
but not a whole lot different.
Okay. Interesting. I'd
Very.
love to meet him. So,
He's
so
incredible.
you're dating now, and that's what I'm saying is already I can tell she has a mind of her own, which I love. But that's the dynamic I really want to get into because now that you're married and have kids, you before all of that happened, you had to know you were dealing with a different situation. You know,
Uh,
women have come out of the fold of the traditional I'm quiet, housekeeper or that's probably an antiquated term, but you know what I mean? Um the husband works and I'm at home. They go to college, they have their own job, or even if they're home, they're going to tell you how things are going to go. There's just a nice trend where their voice is starting to be heard. And I think it's a beautiful thing, but I always wonder, does it get a little confusing? Because now you're wanting a relationship with someone, and does it enter your mind that I want to be the provider, but I know she's strong and I don't know what my role is in this new generation? Like, did you get my question?
I think so.
I mean, did you, because I wonder if you went in it in a traditional thought process and she said, no, 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 this is going to be a little different for us.
So when we first got married, we were both working.
Hmm.
She graduated from college and she's a nurse, and
Okay.
so she worked as a nurse for 9 years
Yeah.
of our marriage, and you know we've had kids within those first 8 or 9 years of marriage, and she was working nights,
Oh,
and
wow.
she was a workhorse, and
Yeah.
we were able to set ourselves up because she put in so many hours.
Hmm.
And so she wanted to be with the kids.
Yeah.
That was where her true joy and passion lied. She loved being a nurse and feeling like she had a sense of accomplishment. You know,
Yeah.
being a mom of kids, you end the day defeated like every day.
Yeah.
And it's really tough. And so her job as a mom is much more difficult than my job as an entrepreneur, 100%, because I
Yeah.
can't do what she does. But she worked for a long time in our marriage, and you know it's funny you ask that. We are such a good team that
Yeah.
whether it's my lane or her lane, we'll cross over lanes. If I'm
Yes.
dropping the ball, she's like, Jarom, I got you.
Yeah.
If she's dropping the ball, sweetie, I got you.
Yeah.
And if that means no sleep that night because I have to prepare a lesson for our kid who's struggling in reading
Yeah.
or math, like I will. I'll do whatever research I need to do to help educate our kids because you're tapped out. I'm not sure if that answers your question or
No, it
not.
does because you went right into where I feel like your generation is, which is you've grasped the concept of partnership. It might not sound romantic, but that's really I think where the evolution of men and women are now, because women are strong and they have the education and they do have careers. So then how do you combine getting married and entering it with maybe the traditional values that your parents set forth for you? It is entirely different, right? Your marriage must look so different to your parents. And I don't think it's a bad thing at all. I just also wonder if men struggle. And so I'm not talking about your marriage specifically, but you have friends and you're obviously out there with other men in the world having these conversations. I always wonder if there's a challenge in knowing when to be strong, when to pull back, open the door, don't open the door. Where is I know you can do anything, you have the strength to do it, but then also be there as the typical male strength that a lot of women depend on. Like, we're a little fickle when it comes to like where we are in this world right now, what we want from a man, right? We want a little bit of everything. So it's a juggling act.
Yeah.
Do you see that with, other men? With not your wife. We're not going to talk about your marriage, but in general.
I do, but it's funny you bring that up because there's some times when, my wife does want me to be everything and all the things all at the same time. And I have to be vulnerable and say, sweetie, I can only do so much.
Yeah.
I think so. I think that's pretty common.
So you have two beautiful girls and two boys. I told him he has to update his Facebook picture.
Yeah.
And they're young, but you will have to see them grow in their relationships. And do you think it'll change even more? And do you look at your daughters different than your sons? Right? I mean, it's an easy thing to keep doing, right? It's hard not to be very protective over the girls and let the boys skin the knees, and it's hard not to fall into those traps. But do you try to avoid the pitfalls of the typical gender roles? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, yes, it's definitely the girls act differently than the boys. And I definitely treat them, the way that they're acting. So I can't say that I parent the same. Okay. Some of my kids have, emotionally can take it. Yeah. Some of my other kids emotionally just can't take it. And so I have to coddle them a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And so I think as a parent, I just use my best judgment on how to best parent them. But it's hard to say that I treat them all the same, because I definitely love them all the same. Absolutely. Yeah. But I do parent each one individually a little bit different based off of their personality and their age.
And, again, we're fast forwarding these little lives, so I don't want to do that. But, when you do talk about parenthood with them in the future, it's just going to be so interesting. You've now changed how you are, and much more affectionate, especially to the boys, which is a wonderful thing. I hope that type of change does continue, because, life's only going to get more challenging, right? It's already tough anyhow. And to know that there's that fallback of trust, affection still equates to manhood, however that works, is something that I've witnessed. I just wanted to explore it as a topic because I didn't know if it was a complicated switch, right? And you don't make me feel like it is, which is beautiful. It makes me feel hopeful that each generation is going to be more receptive to having as much affection to the boys as the girls.
Yeah. Yeah. At least that's the category that I've at least fallen in. Yeah. I look at people that I work with and some business partners, they're the same with their boys, specifically one of my business partners, his dad was in the Marines. Yeah. And so similar situation, there wasn't that affection, but he's all over his sons, just like I'm all over mine. So it's trending that way. Yeah. And it is interesting. And I don't know what's changed or why that's the trajectory. I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe it's just culture. Maybe it's because we haven't had a world war in a very long time.
Yeah.
And, we're kind of in our own little bubble, and,
Mm-hmm.
we haven't had to see and witness the things that our parents have seen, like the Great Depression and stuff like that. So
Mm-hmm.
those things will definitely alter your mind. And we've grown up very blessed. And yeah, it is interesting seeing the dynamic and how that has
Yeah.
shifted.
So the firstborn, was your dad in the delivery room for your kids or for your
I
siblings?
said no to all parents and in-laws.
Okay.
Now I
Okay.
take that back because my father-in-law was the OBGYN.
Oh,
So he
kind of
obviously
had to
was
be
in
there.
there. Yeah,
Oh
he had
my
to be
gosh.
there.
Oh
So
my gosh. That's so interesting.
he
That's
delivered,
awesome.
it was cool actually. He
Oh,
delivered my two girls, and then, they had moved to a different city. And so we had a different OBGYN for my two boys, but he
oh
was in the
my
room for the first
gosh.
two. The other two, no parents were in. To me, now my mother-in-law wanted to be there so bad. And I just,
Especially since her
we
husband's in
have,
there. She's probably like,
yeah,
why can't I be there too?
yeah. But even my sons, she wanted to be there, which I totally understand. But that's like such a special time for me and my wife,
Mm-hmm.
for us to create.
Mm-hmm.
And we wanted to create that memory with us.
Mm-hmm.
And I know it can be hard for in-laws and parents to want to be a part of it. Of course, I understand you want to be a part of it, and that's great. Thank you. But this is our little unit that we're creating, and
Mm-hmm.
so we just would appreciate the space.
No, I love that. And you can't get it back. It's the one moment in time that, you can't
Yep.
get that back. And they'll be in 15 minutes after baby's in a blanket and you can say hello, but let us
Exactly.
have
Exactly.
the skin to skin, and even that skin to skin, like I'm sure your dad was like, what? I mean,
Oh
that was,
yeah. Oh yeah.
yeah, yeah. What do you mean you're doing skin to skin? Yeah.
Yep.
Oh my gosh. And was he around for you all being born or no? Probably half and
Oh
half, a little
gosh.
bit of,
I'm sure he was. I'm sure
yeah,
he was in there when all of his kids were born. Yeah.
yeah. Mm. But not doing the whole skin to skin. Yeah.
No,
Yeah.
absolutely not. Yeah.
Yeah.
No way.
So I also want to talk about so you 15 different jobs, I'm not joking. So you do have a real estate license,
Hmm.
EXP Realty, correct?
Yep.
And you flip houses. We're going to talk about that tough year.
Yep.
And you have a construction side to your business as well.
Hmm.
What the heck am I missing after all that? Which one?
We own a hearing aid company as
Oh,
well.
hearing aid company. Yes. I mean, come
Yeah.
on. These are things that you have control over that are your own job. But with that many that you're juggling, how do you balance your time?
You know what? I don't,
Yeah.
and I don't have balance in my life.
Okay.
Because you can't. I don't have, and I'm embarrassed to say it, but I just don't have enough systems and the right people in place to
Yeah.
where I can create that balance yet.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, that's what I'm working towards, and that's the goal. Some of those businesses have struggled because I've had horrible partners
Yeah.
who didn't take responsibility or didn't pull their weight. And so getting into business with somebody is you have to date, and date for a long time
Mm-hmm.
before you partner with somebody, because that bad partners has definitely created a lot of stress and anxiety in my life.
So you did go through a tough year, and everyone's going to know this because you've seen it on the corners. Doesn't matter where you're from.
Yeah,
The signs that say "We Buy Ugly Houses," which is a franchise I learned. And
correct.
so you own how many franchises in Arizona? Just the one, or
Yep. So we own a Phoenix franchise of We Buy Ugly Houses,
okay? But like, is
and
it geography wise? Is it?
it's like I mean, it goes out pretty far. Phoenix is huge,
I know, right?
and
Yeah,
so it goes all Phoenix and all the suburbs. I mean, there's millions
yeah.
of of people in our geography. But we do have a franchise, and we did really well flipping homes for 3 or 4 years. And then the market in 2020,
Yeah.
the Federal Reserve decided that 2% interest rates weren't healthy for our economy anymore. And so they went from 2% to 7% overnight is what it seemed like. And so we instantly, all of our properties, we were flipping 18 at the time when the market turned, and instantly our properties lost about 15%, each property. And so it's hard to flip a home in a declining market.
Right. Right.
And we lost millions of dollars in those years. And it was tough. It was tough. Me and my business partners, still great business partners today, we're still in it. We did not give up. And we were very fortunate because we didn't want to have to foreclose or go bankrupt on any of our financial partners that we have great relationships with. And we haven't foreclosed on one of them. And we've been able to offload all of them, or turn them into rentals because we're underwater on 7 of them by a lot.
Yeah.
And we've been able to turn them into what's called a pad split. I know we talked about that on the phone.
Yeah. I learned that term. You talk about it real quick because I was unfamiliar.
Yeah. So pad split's a great concept. In my opinion, it's the way of the future for a lot of this new generation. We take a 3-bedroom, 2-bathroom house and we chop it up into 8 bedrooms, and we rent it out per bedroom. And, it's affordable. It's $800 to $1,000 a month for the bedroom, and it covers all of your utilities, your internet, your bed. So all you have to bring is a backpack with your clothes and your toothbrush, and you can move in.
And isn't that how they do it in Europe anyway? I mean, there's a lot of that trend where
very
you
common
are just
in Europe.
renting. Okay. So
Yep, very common. And it's starting to expand here in the United States, and especially as affordability doesn't exist. Phoenix used to be cheap, and it's not anymore. I mean, the average home price is like $500,000 in Phoenix. And so these people can't afford even apartments. You have to pay first month's, last month's rent, security deposit, buy your own furniture, get utilities turned on, internet. It's a mess. Whereas here, it's just plug and play, and all you pay is rent and nothing else. Everything else is covered. So anyways, that concept has saved us on these properties that we had when the market turned. And fortunately to pad split, we've been able to stay afloat. And
I'm going to talk to you offline about this because I do have a friend that I interviewed that I graduated with, and he does work with the homeless, and he works with companies actually all in the how to find pre-homeless, right? Like who's struggling, who's not paying their rent, who are the people that are at risk to be on the street shortly. And I got to tell you, something doesn't mean that they don't have money. It just means they, $4,000, like we're talking about for rent, everything that comes with it is astronomical. Yeah. And to be able to say, okay, offset just that pressure point and rent a room has got to make a difference for a lot of people. I think that's Absolutely. Such a cool synergy to be able to say, have you thought about that? Now, what do you do about background checks though, or anything like that? That would be.
Yeah, so they run background checks, but we don't run credit checks. So credit is not a part of whether we'll rent you a room or not.
Wow.
What we look at is if you're a sex offender or criminal record, obviously absolutely not, because it's co-living.
Right.
And you're sharing bathrooms and you're sharing a kitchen.
Right.
But if you don't have good credit, then that's okay. If you're employed, that's really all that they look at.
Yeah.
To make sure that you can pay the rent.
I think that would be a cool trend to see than having more people out on the street. Okay, so I don't want to take up more of your time, but then I want to wrap up and say, when you had this difficult year and knowing that you saw your parents struggle, did that help you communicate all the feelings that you had within your household of like, look, I am trying to supply food on the table for our family, but I'm struggling here. How does that dynamic change? And I bet you your parents would be just so proud of you how it was all handled. But, it shows how wonderful things are changing in direction. So tell me about that. Because
Yeah.
it was a
You know
good
what?
year.
Yeah. One thing that I will say that I am proud of, my dad, even if he was listening, communication wasn't very good. We,
Mm-hmm.
as he would just kind of bottle it all up and keep it to himself and wouldn't express how he was feeling. And with that, he would become very quiet,
Mm-hmm.
trying to internalize all of the external pressures
Mm-hmm.
of being a father and a husband.
Mm-hmm.
I fall into that. That's my blueprint. My blueprint is
Right.
to hold it all in and just don't tell anybody and work through it myself.
Mm-hmm.
Well, my wife doesn't let me hold it in. She will nag me until I get it out.
Mm-hmm.
Because she always feels like she's done something wrong, and that's why I go quiet.
Right.
And so when
Right.
I'm able to communicate properly
Yeah.
what I'm feeling and my frustrations, it's been extremely healthy for me
Yeah.
and for our relationship. And she helps me internalize and game plan and figure out what the next step is.
Mm-hmm.
And she's a teammate. She is,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's like a Michael Jordan and a Scottie Pippen. We just work so well
Mm-hmm.
with each other. But yeah, I've been trained to hold it in, and expressing my feelings and concerns with her is key to
Mm-hmm.
our relationship. We've grown so much closer through these past 2 years of trials.
Yeah.
When had I not been open and had she not drug it out of me,
Yeah.
it could have been really bad and a rocky relationship and family dynamic. But the communication and her making me be vulnerable and disclose what I'm feeling has definitely strengthened our relationship.
And, women are problem solvers too, even though there's typically like, we're emotional and all these stereotypes. I can't wait for them to eventually go away. But, men are the problem solvers. Women are emotional. No, she probably brought up some valid solutions, or at least tried to get you to say, okay, we're going to work on this together, and not just have it be an emotional outburst, but a plan of action. You
Mm-hmm.
are changing your own blueprint, right? I mean, I love that. That's nice that you did that so that she can feel involved in a solution as well, because we
And
are problem solvers.
and she's so much smarter than I am or ever will be. And so I am grateful that she has drug it out of me, because a lot of the things that she has said and suggested
Yeah.
are the reasons that we haven't had to foreclose and file
Oh.
bankruptcy. So she's very intelligent, and I'm grateful for her.
Well, happy Father's Day.
Thank you so much.
I hope you look at it a little different this year by having this conversation, to where you're doing a good job, and that you love your kids, and to just see the hug and kiss with your boys is meaningful. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you're changing your own family dynamics, and imagine what they're going to do when it's their time, right?
Yeah, I'm
That's why.
interested to see.
Yeah. Well, hopefully I'll be around to interview them. I don't know.
That would be incredible.
Well, best of luck with everything you have going on. And I thank you so much for being on. It's really been a pleasure to get to know you, and kudos to you and your family. And you just have a great, great Father's Day.
Thank you so much.
All right. We'll see you all in the next class reunion.
All right, friends, that's it for this episode of Class Reunion Podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe to the show, write us a review, and share this podcast with a friend. Until next time.